This is Dr. Christopher James Blythe. Dr. Blythe is an assistant professor of folklore and literature at Brigham Young University. He has bachelor's degrees in religious studies from Utah State University and Texas A&M, a master's degree in history from Utah State University, and a PhD in American religious history from Florida State University. He was a historian and documentary editor for the Joseph Smith Papers and currently serves as co-editor of the Journal of Mormon History. He is also the award-winning author of Terrible Revolution, Latter-day Saints, and the American Apocalypse. Very impressive. So why am I bringing him up? That's because Dr. Blythe recently decided to weigh in on the martyrdom debate. I didn't know much about him until he posted a Facebook video depicting a future Jeremy Hoop who repents from being a polygamy denier and from associating with the Who Killed Joseph Smith conspiracy movie. Naturally, after watching this, I invited Dr. Blythe to debate either me on the martyrdom or Jeremy on polygamy. He responded with a very funny meme, saying he'd rather put a campfire out with his face. In my brief interactions with Dr. Blythe, I learned that he's a pretty funny guy, and that gave me an idea. I've never really been funny in these podcasts before, but people like funny, so maybe I'll be funny. Let's see how this goes. Most LDS historians refuse to engage in the Who Killed Joseph Smith debate. In fact, I've only spoken with 3 since the movie came out. 2.5, depending on if you call Brian Stutzman a historian or not. Brian's big claim is that the mob came to Carthage and shot Joseph at the well. And I'm like, yeah, I know, Brian, I agree with you. But the real story is what happened the 2 to 3 minutes inside of the jail, and that's the part that Brian always refuses to talk about.
You can't look at 3 minutes and get the whole story. That's my message.
I thought for sure LDS historian Casey Paul Griffiths would speak with me. He made a video on YouTube about the martyrdom that had something like 300,000 views. Like, this is his thing.
Every object here is a part of the puzzle to put together the story that we're going to try and tell in the next few minutes.
So I reached out to him. He said it was the mob. I said it was an inside job. He invited me to repent, blah, blah, blah. The next LDS historian I had a run-in with was Professor Garrett Dirkmott, and he refused to even discuss the movie because he was so disgusted by it. But then he ended up dedicating 2 full episodes on his podcast, totally ripping me. I reached out to him for a chance to defend myself, and he just completely ignored me. Several historians from the Joseph Smith Papers project also did a podcast where they discussed the movie. And when I reached out to them, big surprise, they had no intent of having a discussion with anyone that didn't agree with them. Eventually, I just accepted that this historian thing isn't going to happen. Whatever. Then along comes Professor Blythe, who decides to engage WKJS with his little stunt video on Facebook. And like an idiot, I totally took the bait.
Friends, I was deeply saddened when I learned that Jeremy Hoop, that guy from the Testaments and Charlie and other LDS films, had become a polygamy denier.
If you want to watch his full video, I put it at the end of this podcast. Of course, he also completely rejected my invitation for a debate, so I decided to do what he did to Jeremy and imagine a future Dr. Blythe who repents and agrees to debate me. Hello, future Dr. Chris. Welcome to the WKJS podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Dr. Chris, I know you probably have many important historical meetings to go to, so I'm going to try to make this quick. I'm going to agree with you up front that a mob came to Carthage to kill Joseph, and that after he fell out of the window and hit the ground, they shot him. Does that sound fair enough?
Wait, you are agreeing that the mob killed Joseph Smith. This is going to be easier than I thought.
Yes, but it's not quite that simple. Let me give you an analogy. Suppose a group of pirates force a man to walk the plank and he's eaten by sharks. Who actually killed the man? Was it the sharks or the pirates?
I refuse to answer that question because it does not support the standard LDS narrative.
Yes, I understand why you might feel that way, because I'm saying it was the pirates inside of the jail and not the sharks outside of the jail that really killed Joseph.
That's preposterous. The history has already been settled. The mob said they did it.
Of course the mob said they did it. They're the sharks, and they didn't know any better. None of them saw what the pirates inside of the jail even did.
But we do know what happened inside of the jail. Willard and John both gave us a full account.
Yes, but the contradictions in their statements prove they were lying.
That's ridiculous. No one has a perfect memory, especially in highly stressful situations. Many studies have been done to prove this.
But you see, I agree with you. Eyewitness accounts are notoriously unreliable. That's why it's so important to study both the forensic evidence along with the historical account if you really want to know what happened inside of the jail that day. And to illustrate my point, let me ask you a few questions. Anyone that has seen John Taylor's watch knows it was not hit by a .69 caliber musket ball traveling over 2,000 feet per second. Even the LDS Church has finally acknowledged this. So, was John Taylor lying about his watch being shot or just misremembering?
I would say he was misremembering. He had no idea what happened to his watch until he saw the damage to it a few days later.
Fair enough, but what about when he said he was falling out of the window and the musket ball that struck his watch threw him back into the room and onto the floor? I mean, that's not even physically possible.
That doesn't mean he was lying. When he fell on the windowsill and broke his watch, he could have thought he was falling out of the window. And perhaps there was some sort of divine intervention to save his life.
Maybe, but remember, not one member of the mob that was outside of the jail that day ever said anything about seeing John come to the window. Which brings us to our next question. How many members of the mob do you believe were there at the Carthage jail at the time of the martyrdom?
150 to 200.
Okay, so you believe Willard Richards.
Actually, that number is taken from D&C 135, which has been attributed to John Taylor.
Actually, John Taylor never said a number. In his two accounts, he only mentioned a number of men and a crowd of men. It was Willard Richards that said 150 to 200 in his letters to Brigham Young and Reuben Hedlock.
Yes, I believe that is correct.
Do you want to know what else Willard said?
Sure.
In his journal entry on the night of the martyrdom, he said it was 100. That same night, he sent a note to Nauvoo that said it was 200. 3 days later, in the Nauvoo Neighbor Extra, he raised it again to 250. That's the same day he sent a letter to Brigham Young going back down to 200. Then, about a month after the martyrdom, in his main account called 2 Minutes in Jail, he went back down to 100.
So what are you saying?
Was Willard lying or misremembering when he gave 5 different estimates for the size of the mob in less than a month?
He wasn't lying or misremembering. He was simply working out what had happened in his mind.
So you don't think that he was embellishing it all on the same night he wrote 100 men in his journal and then doubled it to 200 men in the note he sent to Nauvoo?
How do we even know if those records are accurate? He could have written that journal entry much later.
Whoa! He did not just say that. Whoa!
Interestingly, the only person that actually counted how many people were in the mob was William Daniels, who testified at the trial it was 84. We also know from the historical record now that most likely only 4 members of the mob went inside the jail, 2 of which were teenagers. So where do you suppose the church's narrative comes from that a huge group of angry men poured into the jail, ran up the stairs, and were pushing against the door?
I'll need to check those sources for myself before I can answer that.
Good idea. I highly recommend that. Next question. After the first shot was fired through the door above the latch, did Willard move to the left of the door or to the right of the door?
I know that he said he moved to the left of the door.
That's correct. He claimed he was standing to the left of John Taylor, who was knocking down muskets with his walking stick until Joseph ran out of ammo. Supposedly, that's when John tried to escape through the window. Willard then took John's place, knocking down the muskets with his walking stick. There are three main pieces of evidence that would suggest this part of Willard's story wasn't true. First are the witness statements from William R. Hamilton and Thomas Barnes, who were the first two into the jail after the mob fled Carthage. They both said Willard was hiding in the corner behind the door to escape injury, and Barnes even said Willard was the one that told him that. It wasn't even until a month after the martyrdom that Willard first mentioned he and John were to the left of the door, bravely knocking down muskets with walking sticks. And that leads us to the second piece of evidence. The walking stick that John Taylor used is currently at the Church History Museum. Go and see it for yourself, and you'll notice it shows no marks consistent with it having been used to knock down muskets. The third piece of evidence is Willard's own description of the events. He claimed that the mob was reaching their muskets through the door, probably left-handed, and firing into the corner where he and Joseph were retreating and dodging. And while we were attempting to recreate Willard's description of this event, we realized the muskets were far too heavy to hold and fire with just one hand. But if they had used both hands, the firing pan would have been right next to their faces. So what do you think? Was Willard misremembering or lying about the walking sticks?
I see no reason for him to lie about this.
Interestingly, John Hay straight up called him a liar in his article in the Atlantic Monthly. And here's what he said. Richards hid himself behind the opening door in mortal terror. He afterwards lied terribly about the affair, saying he stood calmly in the center of the room, warding off the bullets with a consecrated wand. Then, in part 2 of Who Killed Joseph Smith, Detective Steiner also called this a lie.
Now, if I show that that was the real walking stick and there was no damage on it, would you say misremembering or lying that they were knocking down muskets?
Yeah, I would say that would be lying. Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's a complete creation of an act that didn't happen.
It's possible that Willard wasn't lying, but maybe just embellishing a bit to make himself look better. That doesn't mean he killed anyone.
Willard was Joseph's personal secretary. How can we trust anything he wrote if he was the kind of person that would embellish to make himself look better?
I think Willard was full of crap.
Next question. So according to Willard, Hiram was dead, lying on his back, and John Taylor was under the bed when Joseph attempted to escape the room. On his way to the east window, mob members firing from the doorway struck him twice in his back. Another shot fired from outside of the jail struck him in his right breast. Willard claimed he was running to the window right behind Joseph while balls were whistling all around. He withdrew from the window momentarily, thinking there was no reason to leap out on 100 bayonets around Joseph's body. But then he reached his head back out of the window to see Joseph when, according to Willard's own handwritten obituary recently acquired by John Hyacek, a drop of blood fell from his left ear and mixed with the blood of the martyr. Now, please don't tell me you believe even one bit of that story.
Why not? I believe it was a lovely tribute to the man Willard most respected and admired.
You mean to tell me that a 300-plus pound man could stick his head out of the window with the whole mob firing at him inside and outside of the jail and no one could hit him?
It was a miracle because he was the only one still wearing his garments.
Okay, cut. Look, Chris, I know garments are off limits to talk about with TBMs, and I seriously doubt you would make that remark about Willard's garments, but I hear this dang response all the time. Magic garments, magic bullets, magic drops of blood. John and Willard deserved a miracle, but not Joseph and Hiram. Next question.
Okay, future Chris, here's the final question. This is the big one. Hiram had 2 bullet wounds in his head, one to the left of his nose and one below his chin. Were those wounds caused by one shot or two?
2. According to Willard, The first shot was fired through the panel of the door that struck Hiram in the left side of his nose. When Hiram fell to the ground, another shot fired through the open door grazed Hiram on his chest and struck him below his chin.
Yeah, you know the old LDS narrative well. But did you know the church officially changed it in 2018 when they published Saints Volume 1?
I know some of the people that contributed to that book. I doubt they were trying to be controversial. I don't think it was their intent to cover every single detail of what happened inside of the room.
Maybe so, but they did say it was only one shot. So how do you account for that?
They can say whatever they want. It's not my job to critique the church's narrative.
Well, the church isn't stupid. They can see just like everyone else in the photos of Hiram's skull that there was no exit wounds. That's how we all know that it was only one shot.
I'm going to give you this one. I do think it's possible that it was only one shot.
Of course it was one shot, but I didn't discover that. That was the Lyon brothers, one of whom was a doctor. Their observation was a huge breakthrough in the case, but they believed the nose wound was the entry and the chin was the exit. But I believe the chin shot was the entry and the nose was the exit, and I'll explain why. First, notice how awkward it would be to make that shot if Hiram was still standing straight up. The more plausible scenario for that shot to work would require Hiram to be bending over at the door, like the Lyon brothers depicted in their theory. Either way you make that shot, the ball exiting below Hiram's chin would have struck him somewhere in his chest, and there is no evidence of that additional wound. The second reason we know the chin wound was the entry is because we now have the death mask that shows both wounds. You can't see the chin wound on the mask at the Church History Museum because the church covered it with plaster. But this copy was taken from the death mask before it was covered up, and you can still see the entrance wound below the chin, which is much smaller than the wound on the side of his nose. That's how we know the chin was the entry wound.
I've seen your supposed research. You seem to be obsessed with that shot under the chin. Why does it even matter?
Was Willard lying or misremembering when he said Hiram was shot twice in the head?
I don't think it matters. Willard saw the wounds and tried to come up with an explanation as best he could. That's not lying.
It is lying. Willard knew it was only one shot, and then a month after the martyrdom, he changed it to 2.
How could you possibly be so sure that Willard knew it was one shot?
Well, according to John Taylor, right after Joseph and Hiram were killed, Willard spent 9 hours alone with their bodies preparing them for removal. He would have seen the wound channel, which would have been obvious from the hole in the roof of Hiram's mouth.
Thousands of people viewed the Smith brothers' bodies. We still have many of their accounts today, which I cited in my book. None of them mentioned one shot or a hole in the roof of Hiram's mouth.
Well, unfortunately in your book, you forgot to mention Joseph's attorney that described the one shot perfectly. He's the one that said a ball hit him under the jaw and passed out through his left eye. You also forgot to mention that during the viewing, Hiram's jaws were tied up. So of course no one else could have seen the evidence inside of his mouth.
Like I said, it doesn't matter. Even if it was a chin shot, that doesn't prove it was an inside job.
So you agree it was a chin shot?
I didn't say that.
It's obvious it was a chin shot, but every critic refuses to acknowledge it. I've gone back and forth with Dan Vogel, RFM, Bill Reel, and they all fight me on this more than anything else. Why is that?
Those guys are all ex-Mormons. So I can't tell you why they would say that.
Well, at least they'll talk with me. Here I am talking to a fake head because the real Dr. Blythe refuses to acknowledge any of this new evidence. But let me tell you why they all run from that chin shot. It's because they all know what that would mean.
Okay, then what do you think it means?
There are only so many ways you can make that shot. Hiram never left the room. No one from the mob ever went inside of the room. That means whoever shot Hiram was in the room with him. Willard lied about the size of the mob. He lied about John Taylor jumping out of the window. He lied about his position in the room and about knocking down muskets with walking sticks. And then he hid crucial evidence of the shot that killed Hiram by tying up his jaws.
Chris, I know you don't want to talk to me because you believe I'm some sort of a conspiracy theorist, and that's fine. But what about you? I mean, you're the one that believes the martyrdom was some sort of organized assassination, and we all know where you got that idea from. Dallin Oaks. I mean, he even named his book The Carthage Conspiracy. So don't you think you're being a little bit hypocritical? I mean, the mob was just a bunch of disorganized kids. When the governor called off their militia, the men turned back. None of them were cowardly enough to attack a man that was already in jail. I'm not saying there wasn't a mob at Carthage, and I'm not saying they didn't shoot Joseph by the well. What I'm saying is this ragtag group of ruffians thrown together at the last minute would have failed. Just like every other plan to get Joseph failed before that. But this time was different though, brother. It took insiders to pull this off, and Joseph never saw it coming. If you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. But one way or another, the truth is going to come out.
Friends, I was deeply saddened when I learned that Jeremy Hoop, that guy from the Testaments and Charlie and other LDS films, had become a polygamy denier. This video is a playful response to his recent podcast release, in which he spouts the usual conspiracy theory-laden version of LDS history that we have come to expect from a certain segment of YouTubers.
Hi, I'm Jeremy, and I'm a polygamy denier.
Polygamy denial holds that Joseph Smith never practiced plural marriage. Those women who claimed to be married to him in Nauvoo were lying. Brigham Young and other devout leaders abandoned the teachings of Joseph Smith to pursue what Jeremy and others call an abomination. This movement is tied to conspiracies that the apostles were in on Joseph Smith's murder. This is what he had to say about those who put out the conspiracy theory that Joseph Smith's martyrdom was an inside job.
Great respect for the work that these people are doing. And Justin, thank you so much for even thinking to include me, and for the work that you are doing, because it's extraordinary. No one's ever tackled this subject like you have.
This video is a playful depiction of an alternative future in which Jeremy returns to his former faith, strengthened in his commitment to the restoration, and no longer slandering the men and women who sacrificed so much at the start of this dispensation.
Be my guest.
Mark, I told you, I need some time, so can you please just go away?
What are you doing here?
Yeah, it's my question exactly.
I owe you an apology.
You sure do.
Do you mind?
No, not at all.
Go home, Sam.
Go home? Come 2,000 miles to see you.
Huh? You've seen me.
I was wrong!
That's right. When all else fails, grovel.
You? Wrong? Impossible.
You were right. I was jealous.
Mm-hmm.
And thoughtless.
Yeah. Don't let me stop you.
I was wrong and I'm sorry.
Good.
Instead of watching Jeremy Hoop's new podcast, why not watch Charlie? Past and future, Jeremy Hoop will thank you. Plus, it's free on YouTube. You'll love it. They ride a Ferris wheel.
Rafferty, I'd like to be my fiancé. He's just proposed, and you are the first one we've told.
Actually, we just met.
Well, congratulations, kid.
Why, thank you. Sam and I would like to ride your Ferris wheel for a long, long time. You understand?
I'm not that old.
Thanks for watching. Join us next time when future Jeremy Hoop apologizes to Eliza R. Snow.
I was wrong!